Studies show that the impact of culture and revenue is undeniable. That according to a Gallup poll, that companies that prioritize culture or have 33% more revenue. 33% more revenue.
Because I agree that, especially with AI-enabled technology and how we're starting to see AI capabilities embedded in existing HR technology, that is certainly going to supercharge the talent development process.
When you have a general market, quote, an English-speaking commercial, let's say, instead of just dubbing over that commercial, that same commercial, and bringing it to the Spanish community, now you create a commercial for the Spanish language community, right? Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 10X Blueprint podcast. My name is Simone Knight, and I am your host. Today, we have an amazing conversation. We will be talking about talent development as a competitive advantage. So my guest today is none other than Ashaki Rucker. Hi, Ashaki. How are you?
I'm good, Simone. How are you?
I am great. Let me tell the people who you are, because you have such a long and impressive career in human resources and talent development. So Ashaki is SVP of Human Resources at Telemundo, at NBC Universal, Telemundo Enterprises, and Latin America. She started her career leading HR teams in the financial industry with such big names that you may recognize like JP Morgan Chase, UBS, Deutsche Bank, and PwC. She then transitioned her career into HR with iconic media companies like Warner Media, the Walt Disney Studios, and has remained at the forefront of HR shaping strategy and driving diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives all across these brands. Ashaki is making an impact in both the conference room and the boardroom. She serves on the boards of Emirates Bank and Rebuilding Together Miami-Dade, as well as the advisory board of the University of Miami's Herbert Business School's Executive Education Program. Ashaki brings over 3 decades of expertise in today's discussion on talent development as a competitive advantage. And I cannot wait to have this conversation with you, Ashaki. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited about the conversation with you too, Simone.
Absolutely. So you are looking pretty in pink today on this beautiful spring/summer day.
Thank you. Thank you.
South Florida. It is so hot today, but your colors really bring up the day and the brightness.
Thank you.
You know, one of the things that I love to do with my guests initially is I love to start off with a rapid fire, just so that the audience can get a chance to get to know you on a little bit more personal level before we get into the conversation more deeply. So I want to start off with the rapid fire. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready?
I'm ready.
So you're working with NBC Universal. So I would love to understand from you, what would you say are some of the most favorite shows that you have on your network there?
My absolute most favorite is actually on Peacock. Peacock is our streaming platform for those who may not be familiar. And my favorite show is The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I don't know if you've seen it yet. As a child, that was one of my favorite shows, and we have reimagined it in such an amazing way on Peacock. So if you haven't seen it, definitely a family-friendly favorite. The ups and downs of a Black family navigating through normal life challenges in a really loving way. So that's become one of my all-time favorites.
That's a good one, actually, because I definitely grew up on the old school version of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And I did actually see some clips of the new reboot version. And I was saying to my husband and my daughter, I was like, oh, I think that that's something that we should check out. So that's right on. That's right there in terms of something that's in my wheelhouse.
Nice.
So if you can cast yourself in an NBC Universal TV show or Peacock show, which one would it be and why?
Oh, boy. Cast myself in a show. I actually really like all of our selling real estate shows. I'm a bit of a real estate junkie, so that is right up my alley and in my sweet spot. So I tend to get hooked on all the variations of selling the OCs, whatever selling real estate show there is on NBC. I have watched it, and I would be perfectly cast in one of those.
That is great. Okay, so Ashaki is the secret real estate agent. All right, we know that. Okay, so which NBC Universal show or movie do you think would be the best inspiration for an HR training program? What lessons do you think we would learn from that? I can't wait to hear your answer.
It's a funny question, but I'll take a little bit more serious route, because I probably would choose our news shows. So Nightly News with Lester Holt, or Even the Telemundo Noticias, so Noticias Telemundo, which is our news channel on the network, our news show on the network. And probably because, for two reasons. One, Lester Holt, for those who aren't as familiar with him, he is one of the most trusted news journalists and anchors on air. And for Telemundo Noticias, we have a saying, "La cosas como son," which is we tell it like it is. And I feel like from an HR standpoint, without trust, integrity, objectivity, we have nothing. So those two shows for me, I think are really relevant for us as an HR function in terms of how we move, the way that we move within the organization. And whether the training is for my team or leaders, I think having that strong moral compass is at the core of what we do. So those would be my choices for any kind of HR training.
Hey, so no Jimmy Fallon. No.
No, it's really valid. Not in my world. Sorry, no.
Okay. Conversation for another time.
Exactly.
Okay, so what are you reading right now?
To be completely honest, I'm doing more listening right now. So I have a favorite podcast that is actually Susie Orman's Women and Money. If you haven't listened to it, female or not, amazing in terms of tidbits of financial wisdom from one of the financial greats. I feel like financial management has been core to my success, both personally and professionally. And there's always more to learn. So I am really enjoying, and it's very much like this discussion here, where she's facilitating and taking questions and just giving very transparent, honest feedback. So I'm taking away a ton.
I love that a lot because she is the OG who knows where the money is.
Exactly, right. I'm like the guru of all gurus, and she tells it like it is again.
So now I know that you've had such a long and illustrious career. So are there any leadership lessons that you would say that kind of impact how you lead today that you've sort of brought with you along the journey?
I would say probably one of my biggest leadership lessons is around being able to distance yourself from some of the tough decisions that you have to make as a leader. I think I've watched some leaders actually, I would say, negatively impact their personal brand by not being able to make some of the tough decisions that they need to make as it relates to members of their teams because of their personal relationships. So for me, I've always prided myself on being able to make the tough decisions that need to be made on behalf of an organization, despite the closeness of the relationships that I had. And talk about OGs, Bob Iger was the OG of gracefully making tough decisions and transitions on his leadership team that were ultimately game changers for the organization. So I took a lot from watching his movements. I was many layers down in the organization when I was at the Walt Disney Company, but I remember watching those lessons and going, oh, wow, is courageous enough to make those big decisions despite the length of time or the relationships that he's had with some leaders, if it was clear that they weren't in alignment with where he was taking an organization. And again, I just feel like it was a game changer for the organization in terms of clarity around what he was trying to achieve and what you needed to do as a leader to align with that. And if you weren't able to align with that, he would make the changes. And I thought, oh, wow. It just stood out for me because I've been doing this work for so long and I've seen leaders really struggle with that piece. But the implications of that for the organization are so significant that I've always admired it. So I've tried to incorporate that into not only my own leadership, but the coaching that I give to my internal clients.
It's interesting because I remember some years ago, there was a book about people who you have on the bus, right? Maybe it was called The Energy Bus, something like that. But I can't remember right now, but it was all about what you just said, that when you make changes in an organization, there are going to be some people that will be ready for that change, that will join you on the new journey. They will literally get on the bus with you and they will go. And then there's some people who do not want to get on the bus. And there's some people who just cannot take the journey, right? Maybe they don't have the skills, or perhaps they don't have the right cultural attitude to join this new organization. people will self-select in terms of which way they want to go. And it is okay, regardless of whichever way that they choose. If there is a conscious and there is a clear decision as to why and who and how, I think ultimately the organization gets to go where they need to go, and people get to transition into wherever they need to go at their point in their life.
Exactly, because some people will stay on the bus and say all the right things about being in line, but they're rowing in a completely different direction all day, every day. They're driving that way and the bus is going that way. And it's clear. And as leaders, we need to be able to identify that and help navigate through that sooner rather than later because of the implications. So yeah, that's been a really big one.
Okay, so my last rapid fire question before we really get into the interview, which was, I have a theory about first jobs. And my theory is that your first paying job tells a lot about who you are today. So my question to you is, what was your first paying job?
My first paying job, just in terms of sheer money, was a babysitter. That was what I did. And this was a little bit different for a young person, was I would do the normal babysitting, but I would take children out all over New York City. The main differentiator was it would be like, okay, let's keep the kids busy. Let's not just sit home and watch the kids, but let's do fun things all over New York, which was a lot of responsibility for a young person, to your point, and being in New York. That was my first job. But then from a corporate standpoint, my first paying job was actually a temp at the front desk of many midtown corporations. So that kind of piqued my interest in the corporate environment and wanting to get integrated behind the scenes outside of just doing the front desk introductions. So those were sort of my two formal and informal first paying jobs.
So what you're saying about your first paying job as a babysitter is that you were taking care of people. You were guiding people.
Bingo. I was guiding people as I was at the front desk. I was guiding people, welcoming people, doing all the feel-good stuff. Yeah, so there's a theme there for sure.
My theory has yet to be proven incorrect. And it's so amazing to me that I have spoken to at least 50 people on this question, and it still remains correct.
I love that.
All right. So now that we know a little bit more about you, so we know you're from New York. We know that you're now a Miami woman, and you out here doing it with your pink and your bright colors. You turned away from the all black, even though you were wearing a black tank top, for those of you listening.
Definitively. We get it in there, but a pop of color for Miami for sure.
Represent the MIA for that. All right. One of the things that we're talking about today, talent development as a competitive advantage, right? First of all, let me ask, what does that mean to you? Because I know what it means to me when I hear those words, but from you coming from a perspective of working with these major global iconic corporations in talent development, DE&I initiatives, growth, and helping to steward the transition of employees at all levels into growing their career. What does talent development as a competitive advantage mean to you?
I think of talent management and talent development. So I feel like there are two elements to it. So talent management for me is like the macro at the org level of what skills and capabilities does an organization need at any given time to meet business objectives, right? So from a HR business leader perspective, we always need to be keeping an eye on what are those critical skills and capabilities that are required. And then the talent development piece as a competitive advantage, to your point, is really around, okay, once we're really clear on what those skills and capabilities are, how do we go about developing those skills and capabilities in the organization? And what is the menu of options by which we can go about growing careers in organizations and ensuring that we're playing a key and very proactive role in that talent development process? At least the high level definition of how I kind of view talent management. And then the talent development side, which I feel like is more of the execution side of your talent management strategy.
Interesting. The reason why I asked that is because right now there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of noise, and just a lot going on in general in terms of this question of talent development, talent management. We're just coming off of the big resignation after COVID, and now we're in this very, very tight job market. But also there's a battle for certain types of talent too in terms of retention. So if you are able to attract and retain key talent then that becomes a competitive advantage. There have been staff reductions at some major technical companies that then others have taken that as an opportunity to bring some of that technical insight into their business for obvious reasons, right? Again, competitive advantage. For you, in what ways do you see the current hyper focus on emerging technologies reshaping talent development practices?
It's such a great question. The first thing that comes to mind for me is never losing focus on the human aspect of talent management, right? Because I agree that, especially with AI-enabled technology and how we're starting to see AI capabilities embedded in existing HR technology, that is certainly going to supercharge the talent development process, because what we're finding is with the AI-enabled HR technology is that the manual data management process that I think has been an ongoing and consistent challenge for the talent management process starts to become minimized, because AI has the capability to make connections between disintegrated systems. So bring information together, whether it's talent profiles, right, where people are tracking their experiences, whether it be career opportunities. So what new career opportunity aligns with what I've indicated my career interests are? Could be what development opportunities, right? Because there's a lot of on-the-job development, talent development happening, but then there are a lot of things that we actually do in the classroom. So AI and the technology enablement really is able to connect the dots for us in a rapid-fire way and then make information available to whether it's talent acquisition, whether it's a leader who's looking for a skill and capability on their team that they don't have today, or whether it's an employee or leader who's looking to take their next step. So it's really leveraging technology to sort of track clarity around where you want to go, the progress that you're making, the opportunities that are available to you to take advantage of. And I think for organizations, from a competitive standpoint, we need employees to be looking at opportunities for us internally before they're looking outside, right? That is the competitive advantage. And when you are a global conglomerate like we are, with the size and scale that we have, the opportunities are endless, but it's how do you bring the right data forward at the right time for the right constituent to ensure that you're navigating all of the different components of the talent management process effectively. And that's really where I see technology playing the biggest role. But you can't really manage effective talent management without the people aspect, which is where I started. So I want to just come back to that, because the conversations that happen around managing careers and development can be very nuanced and they can be very sensitive. And that is what technology cannot do. So in our organization, we've been hyper-focused on ensuring that we're developing the skills and capabilities of our leaders to ensure that they have their finger on the pulse of what is the career interest of a leader on your team? What are the career aspirations? Where does that person want to go? And how can you help them navigate to that? What opportunities can we build for them to get them moving in that direction? And how do you also have the frank and honest conversations that also need to happen with people as they're on that journey, right? Because sometimes people's readiness is not necessarily aligned with where they want to go at a particular time. So that's where having really upskilled leaders and strong HR professionals to help navigate those conversations becomes just extremely critical.
Wow, you said a lot there that I want to sort of tap into and unpack. First of all, you mentioned something about asking people where they want to go in the career. And I just want to bring it back to you, to something personally. You triggered a thought for me, because I remember maybe middle or so of my career, I think I might have been director or vice president or so at this time. And I had asked a new employee on my team where they wanted to take their career. And they paused for a moment. And they said they had never been asked that question before. And this is someone who had several years in the workforce at this point. And so they actually had to stop and think about it. Wow, no one has ever asked me that. I'm just like, okay, this just seems like the natural thing to ask someone. But then it brings a question to mind for me, which is about workplace culture. how much does workplace culture really play a role in the talent development and asking the type of questions that you just talked about and putting forth that plan of the steps towards the talent development strategy, basically within your organization? I want to just quote something to you really quickly. I was doing some research on this, and I see that about 88% of job seekers consider a healthy work environment vital to the success of their job, where they work, right? Vital. 88% of job seekers consider that vital. But I don't know that many organizations are really seeing it that way. However, I would also venture to say that maybe it has changed from COVID. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm so glad that you honed in on that point, number one. Number two is, for me, that is at the core of it. Culture is everything, right? And when you asked the question, I organically, naturally just went to what we do and the culture that we've built here at MDC Universal. But the reality is that that is not necessarily the safe space that has been created in all organizations, whereby it's part of our organic DNA to be having more open, transparent conversations about career aspirations and our commitment to helping our employees navigate their careers. So for us, culture is everything. We have our survey process that we do every other year, which is essentially our opportunity to assess how are we doing from a culture standpoint. And employees actually have used that opportunity to say, hey, we want to continue to have a focus on the development of our careers. So I agree that the two are very much connected in terms of culture and talent management. And we spend an exorbitant amount of time ensuring that we're creating the right environment. And post-COVID, I think for many organizations, that's become even more critical. And I feel like the paradigm has shifted a bit for a lot of organizations that weren't as focused on culture, because post-COVID, I feel like employees had more options. There were a lot more hybrid or completely remote options, I should say. And we were able to make different choices and started to ask us different questions, even in the interview process from a talent acquisition standpoint around, well, what's the purpose of your organization and what's really important to you guys? So it changed the game. But I think one of the things that I feel really proud of at MBCU is that we have a very strong culture. And even here at Telemundo Center, we have very high employee engagement scores, which are really a reflection of the culture that we've created within this organization. And the development piece is endless for us here. We spend an exorbitant amount of time focused on how should we be looking at developing our employee population at the various levels and stages of their careers. So culture definitely critical as a starting point, because if employees are not happy coming to work, then nothing else really matters. And the development piece is a component of that. But there are obviously many other things that drive culture in an organization.
Well, you know what? The studies show that the impact of culture and revenue is undeniable. That according to a Gallup poll, that companies that prioritize culture or have 33% more revenue. 33% more revenue. That is significant.
It's significant. And toss DEI in that data as well, because employees that are more diverse also outperform competitor organizations financially as well. So I think when we talk culture and DEI also being an integral part of culture, the two go very much hand in hand, because that diversity creates the space for an organization to also be much more competitive than less diverse organizations.
Absolutely. There's definitely a lot to unpack there. One of the things that I learned in my career as I was coming up is I learned how to incorporate my leadership style and my experiences, right? And so I came up with my 3C culture approach. And that was to cultivate curiosity so that we can create innovation, collaboration so that we can go far together, and then communication so that we can learn from each other. And I think as you talk about diversity, that goes back into the communication and the collaboration, because people will do this in different ways based on their experience, right? Based on the path that they've taken. And when you do this well, you end up with an organization that works well together, innovates together, less intimidated with about what someone else might be doing, and are more focused on the goal about moving forward. And that's where you get a point where you have talent developing each other now with that communication.
Absolutely. And I love this point because I think what gets lost frequently in the DEI conversation is the fact that it's not just a nice to have, right? I think people often feel like, okay, because yes, it is doing the right thing, and that is absolutely important to the point around culture. But the net of it is what you're describing are more impactful results for the business. I think we just need to hit that point hard on the head, because as DE&I comes under attack and is less trendy at the moment, because we don't necessarily have a George Floyd incident in front of us, even though I think we're having those moments on the news all the time. You don't have something as extreme as George Floyd. You have legislation being attacked, and then it's less trendy. But for organizations like us at NBCU, we've been extremely consistent on the fact that diversity is integral to our organization and the culture that we're trying to create here. And it's not about the trendy thing to do. We're just really clear on the fact that it's a business imperative.
And for you, being in media, of course, your audience is diverse, right? So you want to be able to serve your audience, super serve your audience in many different areas, right? Out in the community, in the news, in the storytelling on the scripted shows, on the performances for the live shows. It just makes sense. The dollar, it's green, but everybody else is a different color.
Exactly. So you need to be speaking people's language, and they need to see themselves represented in the work that you do. Representation is critical. It matters. And I can't overstate that, because it is so fundamental to the work that we do, to your point, particularly in the media industry.
Having said that, one of the things that I'm so pleased has changed over time, because Telemundo is Spanish media, right? And I also work for a Spanish media company. And so one of the things that I've seen is that when you have a general market, quote, an English-speaking commercial, let's say, instead of just dubbing over that commercial, that same commercial, and bringing it to the Spanish community, now you create a commercial for the Spanish language community, right? For the African-American community, for the Asian Pacific American community, because there are some cultural nuances that are so important to the storytelling.
Yes.
And to the adoption of that particular product. And that just makes your product more viable to that particular audience when you speak their language, as you said.
Authentically speak their language, to your point. There's not a one-size-fits-all cut and paste, which is what I think that you're describing, but let's really take the time to understand how we can reimagine this in the context of authentic culture for, in this case, Hispanics. So yeah, I couldn't agree more.
We talked a lot about, or referenced, I should say, a few times the pandemic and some of the things that have changed from there. There have been definitely some terrible and heart-wrenching things coming from the pandemic, but there also has been some good things. And one of those things, I think, is a focus on mental health. People really recognizing that it's okay to ask for help, that you should recognize your own mental state, and when you do need to take a break or meditate. These are the coping mechanisms that we've all had to figure out during a very difficult time in our history, in our lives. And I wonder, media is a very, very fast-paced industry. It never shuts down. And when there's a holiday for everybody, it is not a holiday for us, because now people want to consume more media and content and enjoy their family and friends and share information and so forth. And I wonder, how can companies champion this employee well-being while still driving creativity, innovation, development? How do you see that sort of changing after the pandemic? And what are some things that you see are like best practices in that?
I feel like COVID was such a traumatic experience for everyone that, at least for us, Comcast, who's our parent company, has done a phenomenal job at ensuring that we're bringing forward a vast amount of resources for the differing needs that really address whatever challenge employees have that ultimately creates that anxiety and stress that impacts mental health, whether it be parental care, so elder care, parental leave for fathers. We've done some great work in that space. here at Telemundo Center, we offer sound bell meditation. So take a beat during the middle of the day and, to your point, figure out how to bring your stress levels down and just get back in tune. We offer massages. So we are covering the gamut in terms of the menu of offerings and resources that an employee might need. So we've been really thoughtful, I would say, about how do we stay innovative and creative around meeting all the various needs. So again, because there isn't a one size fits all, but how do we meet the various needs of our employees? And the feedback has been fantastic. I think some of our challenge now is how do we communicate everything that we have in a succinct way? Because when you offer so much, that also gets overwhelming. But my team actually does a monthly health and wellness event, and we take cues from our parent company at Comcast around what topics should we be focusing on at a given time. So there's some level of continuity across the company, but employees have really received that well. So those are some of the best practices that we've employed that we've been getting a ton of really positive feedback on.
Well, you had me at meditation bells.
The beautiful experience. I actually brought them to my HR offsite, and we kicked off our meeting with the sound bell meditation. And it was just to get everybody centered. Because when you have so much going on, you want to be creative, to your point, you want to be innovative. You also need to be present. And there's often just so much noise. It was a way for me to center the team before we got into our own work. But yes, it's very integrated into the DNA of who we are. So when people see that kind of thing, they're not very surprised within our culture.
That's amazing, because I know some people probably listening to this podcast might be like, what kind of frou-frou science is that? Let me say this. It is not frou-frou. There is a frequency that your body, different, quote, chakras, right, that they resonate to. And when you hit this right frequency, I personally feel this wave of calm go through my body with these specific frequencies that are out there. I would encourage anybody, just go on YouTube, just look up the sound wave meditations, and you're going to come across a lot of videos. Play a few of those videos when you're trying to relax, just and see what happens. And I will get to your comments.
I couldn't agree more. I love it. And we also made the Calm app accessible to all of our employees and their children over the age of 16, because as parents, helping to navigate the mental health of our children is core to the work that we're doing now, too, with social media. So making the Calm app available where you can use the sound meditation and a myriad of other stretching and quick exercise clips that just kind of recenter you has been game-changing.
So one last thing I want to just talk with you about, Ashaki, is from HR leaders that are listening to this event right now, and they're looking to leverage talent development as a strategic differentiator in their organization, right? Maybe it's a startup, or maybe it's a legacy brand like Comcast, NBC, Universal that's been around for 50 plus years or so, right? They're looking to leverage strategic training and development as that differentiator for retention, for acquisition, for that culture and environment that we talked about. What would you say would be some best practices that they should use in order to develop that pathway within their organization?
Talked about a lot of them. The biggest takeaways, I would say, culture at the core. So ensuring cultural readiness and ongoing evolution of culture, because as these practices evolve, as the HR technology evolves that you can leverage, at the core of it, you still need to ensure that the culture and the organization is ready to digest and evolve with the pace of change that's happening. So I would say definitely not losing sight of culture and the human side of it. And then secondly, I would say just really double click on the human aspect, is ensure that you're keeping pace with new technology and how AI capabilities are being integrated into the various technologies, but do not lose sight of the human aspect and upskilling leaders and upskilling HR. I cannot stress that enough, because I think as technology becomes much more advanced, there's an expectation that the technology is going to be the answer and the full solve for our talent management and development challenges. And I think it's really the merge and the fusion of the two that are really going to give you the biggest bang for your buck. So yes, leveraging the most effective technologies that pulls together disparate information so that your leaders, HR professionals, and employees at all levels have the information that they need, timely, relevant info at the right time, but that information is supplemented by leaders and HR professionals who can really navigate people through sensitive and nuanced conversations in the most effective way possible. So those would be the biggest tips that I can provide for HR professionals who are embarking on this work or continuing to evolve the work like the rest of us.
Well, thank you, Ashaki, because this conversation has been absolutely amazing. And the work that you've been doing for all these times, like you said, about 3 decades of work in terms of training and development and your style and your leadership, it just really shows. So thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the 10X Blueprint podcast.
Thank you, Simone. Thanks for having me.
Join us next week for the next episode of the 10X Blueprint podcast. And if you have not already done so, you definitely want to listen to the previous episodes. And you can find the video version at Brandiverse Marketing on YouTube, or you can listen to the audio version on Apple Podcast or Spotify. Until next week, see you then.